I think this particular work is all about building your sense of capacity, learning more about the passions that you have for particular topics. We ask teachers to explore those topics, whether they're talking about pollution, or they're talking about climate change, whether they're talking about poverty or humanitarian issues. Like these times gives teachers an opportunity to delve into those particular topics that matter to them, but then also matter to students. And if we're doing this in the most optimal way, we're having an opportunity for students to chime in about those things that excite them. Right? And we're hearing from them, and they're having those conversations throughout the year about the kinds of topics that students want to talk about. So we're tapping into their passions and interests. So here's the protocol of how like all of those things go into this design protocol, right? So the adaptive competencies, the academic content area standards, the academic competencies, and you can do this without doing competency-based education. If you're not doing competency-based education and you're doing standards-based grading, you can most certainly do that, right? And the idea is for our teachers to think through really specifically and intentionally about the purpose of their task and the different competencies that students can meet and exhibit during this particular time. So here's just an example of this work. Here are examples of projects that teachers focused on. And you can see, right, the different topics that they focused on. You can see the different adaptive competencies that they concentrated on as well. And some teachers focused on multiple adaptive competencies and pulled different descriptors from those adaptive competencies. And you can also see, right, the different social justice tasks that they focused on or that they've woven into this experience. And then the demonstrations, the way of learning that students will showcase. So we didn't just ask students to participate this and didn't get feedback, right? I think it's really important for us as we're on this journey to learning more about the effectiveness of our work, right? And how we can iterate and change along the way, right? We asked students that participated, and right now you're looking at Northside College Prep's data right now, right? And through the tasks that they created, 78% of students explored their interest, right? Through that particular assignment and their passions. 80% of students believe that they have the opportunities to make choices about their learning in assignments. 82% of those students feel like they can contribute their ideas and others can contribute their ideas as well in assignments. And 96% of students were able to practice within a group, right? So collaboration. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? That kind of agency, that collaboration, the leadership skills that you're building through this process, the adaptability and the flexibility that you're building through this process. How do we know if it's actually happening if we're not getting the voices of the students involved? And so I've said enough about the process. I'm sure you want to hear more about the products. And so I'm going to pass it along to both Tim and Joanna so they can share with you how they've gotten all of these responses from these wonderful students through their performance-based assessment tasks.
All right, so we developed what we called our Big Messy Project. And our students are freshmen and they come to us from all over the place in the city of Chicago. And so we developed this project with a few goals in mind, but we wanted to give you a brief overview before we shared the goals. So first, we called this the Big Messy Project. Can you move to the next slide? Thank you. Because we wanted them to answer a question that was messy or interdisciplinary. And because our cohort is built on an interdisciplinary model. So we have English, social science, and science all in the same, like collaborating in the same courses. So last year, we had 20 some students, and they investigated all sorts of different things. And the questions that they came up with were their own, but we helped them to develop the questions so that they could be messy and interdisciplinary. So they came up with these questions, and then they wrote an annotated bibliography with their own sort of secondary research. They proposed a primary research plan, and then made a presentation with some sort of artifact that was their choice. And then they wrote a research essay, like a pretty intense research essay. This project lasted all year, and we had many moments with lessons to support them through each step of the way. And we kind of divided and conquered those lessons based on our various expertise from our different disciplines. But in the end, they were able to become experts in their question and came up with some pretty cool things.
Yeah, so we had several goals and skills that we wanted to focus on. Part of the academic component, and Joanna has given a great overview there, is we wanted to get students comfortable with modifying their research project, right? They would begin by throwing out questions that they were interested in. And we would give them feedback on that. Those questions would be a broad question and then supporting questions that would be related and possible avenues of investigation. As Joanna mentioned, the whole purpose there was to have that be interdisciplinary and to ensure that like, this is a question that was pretty messy, pretty complicated per the Big Messy project. The next steps were involving like the synthesis of sources. So after they did the annotated bibliography, they actually had a presentation and a paper. And we'll get into the presentations in a moment. But they also had to come up with a primary research plan. So in addition to the sources, we wanted them to think about like creating surveys, also interviews, and ways in which they could collect their own data were they to have more time for that. Unfortunately, the pandemic didn't allow for that, but we still had them come up with like a draft of what that would look like. And obviously throughout all of this, they had a claim that sometimes was changing, that was like centering around like what they were finding with their evidence. On the adaptive side of things, something we tried doing originally was, I think Damarr mentioned that it's really hard to incorporate so many different standards that are adaptive into a project. And so I know that we probably took some inspiration from Joanna there, who was tying different adaptive competencies to the work she was doing in physics. And so we had these very small reflections, and we used Google Forms and other, we're tied, CPS is tied with Google Classroom. So we had Google Questions as well that were just kind of like gauging their celebrations and challenges with regards to the project. And these kinds of celebrations and challenges would come up at different key points throughout the year. As Joanna mentioned, it was kind of a project that went throughout the entire year. So at different points when they would like come up with their question and like do preliminary research, we'd find out where they were feeling and things like that. After everything was over, they also would like give like a further reflection and also kind of reflect on what they learned from other people's projects. These were tied together with like throughout, like there was peer review. So this is like social awareness, interpreting, using and giving feedback, and acknowledging some struggles and seeking supports for them. We knew that like, because this was going to be a challenge, because this is also a year that was mostly remote and then went to hybrid, it was going to bring with it its own challenges. And as a result, we wanted to encourage students that if they were having trouble with research or having trouble finding specific sources, that they could reach out to us and ask questions. So that's been kind of where we centered a lot of the adaptive social emotional learning components.
We also had some goals for ourselves as teachers. This was our second year of doing this cohort, and we had kind of an abrupt end to our first year in our cohort with the pandemic. So we adjusted as a result. But our big goals were figuring out how to support the freshmen, because a lot of them had never done anything like this before, and helping to guide them through the research process. But also, we weren't taught as educators to be interdisciplinary necessarily. I didn't take any coursework on how to teach English. So figuring out how to stretch our own comfort level and be transparent with that with our students. But also knowing that different people have just different expertise, and that's okay. And some things that really helped us, and Tim already touched on a couple of these things, was having each student have a designated mentor teacher for their project, so that we could focus on about a third, because there are 3 of us, of the students. Not that we weren't giving feedback to everyone, but that they had sort of one person that was really in depth following them. Also doing those mini lessons and breaking up the project into lots of little parts. And then the last thing that we did was having examples. So throughout the year, actually Tim, I think, sort of did the Big Messy project on his own, for his own Big Messy question, and shared with the students the end product that he came up with. And this year, our third cohort member is doing her example for the Big Messy project. So the students have an example to look at when they're submitting their work.
So we want to give you a taste of what these students did. And these are the final products, right? So because it was a complicated year with presentations, we kind of blew up the idea of what a presentation was. And so we had students give a final product in a myriad of different ways. And I kind of want you to experience them. If we could go to the next slide. Before we start playing this video, this student's question was, how does socioeconomic class affect social mobility for Americans? If we could play the video, and I'll tell you when to stop.
Hello, I'm Ebwa Deshida, and this is my Big Messy project. My big question is, what is the state of upward mobility in America? I will be exploring my findings with the use of the movie Spirited Away to help give a better understanding. To answer the question posed, America's capitalist economy is fueled by the desire for upward mobility, but the achievement of it is mostly left up to people who have capital goods or power. To help understand the movie examples, the basic setup is a 10-year-old girl named Chihiro and her parents come across an abandoned theme park. Her parents end up getting turned into pigs and they become trapped in the park. Chihiro is then taken in by a boy named Huko, who explains that the park is a resort or bathhouse for spirits, and she must find work in order to free herself and her parents. Firstly, the way capitalism is fueled by people's wants. According to Adam Hayes, a financial writer, a capitalist economy works by having private individuals or corporations own capital goods, and the production of goods is based on supply and demand. Due to that system, work becomes about profit or experiencing upward mobility rather than the needs of the consumer. So in order to make more money, you have to work harder. Therefore, the desire for money fuels the economy. However, the only real profits are experienced by the owners of capital goods, because they are in control of production and how the employees get paid. This is seen in the movie through the bathhouse's structure. Yubaba, the boss, would be a private individual who owns capital goods. The workers there provide relaxation services to the spirits who are in need of cleansing. They treat spirits who are more wealthy with more services and respect because the workers will get more money from them. Yubaba uses the workers for her own needs, and when they are no longer useful to her, she gets rid of them. Another finding was income inequality or an uneven distribution of wealth.
If we could pause here. So we see here, like, students were they brought their talents to this in a really specific and wonderful way. Some students are very good at editing videos, as you can see, and also really good at narrative analysis, and we're able to kind of blend together a multidisciplinary approach of social science and literature to kind of provide a fascinating reading and answer to that question of upward mobility. If we can move on to the next one.
Hello.
Okay. Oh, thank you. The next one is the question for the student was, how does Christianity affect traditional African beliefs and religions? The student gave a great presentation and overview of like some different sources, but also wrote a poem that was kind of like their artifact to showcase what they learned here. So I want to give people a moment to read this. Okay, if we can move on to the next one. Okay, so we kind of have like a bunch of different talents here. We saw that the previous student was a very, I think, very talented writer in the way that they were able to integrate their sources into something creative. This student's question was, what is the current state of Native American land rights and the Black Lives Matter movements within the US? And kind of did like a little bit of a archaeological historical dig of different movements and seeing like their progress throughout history. And after, as part of their presentation, their artifact was this poster that had a lot of different images of different protest movements and things like that that were happening in the past few years.
So this year we have a new group of students in our freshman cohort, and we are not done. They have started the process with their Big Messy project, but they are asking different questions, which makes sense because it's what they are coming up with. So here are a few of their questions that they are working on this year. And we're excited to see what they come up with. So if you have questions, I think we have some time. If you have questions for us, we're happy to answer them, any of us.
We do have a comment in the chat about how inspiring all this work is and the students, and that's certainly true. And we really appreciate you sharing this. So feel free to take yourself off of mute or throw a question in the chat. I'm wondering, I'll sort of start us off, and maybe Tim or Joanna, either one of you could speak to like the most impactful learning that you yourself have had through this process.
I think I said this in one of our cohort meetings, but I think some of the things that have been really helpful for me is backwards design and like starting with the skills and content I want my students to be able to learn and demonstrate. And I've started doing that in all of my courses and not just my CBE courses. But I think that that's been really powerful for me. And then I guess the second thing for me would also just be like not assuming anything, which I feel like I told myself that I did that before, because our students have such different backgrounds coming into our school. But like assuming they know nothing and don't have the skills, but then assessing where they're at when they come so that we can adjust as needed.
I think a big one for me was because Joanna, Veronica, and I, it's our social science teacher, work closely together to develop and work with these students. It's been really awesome for me to be in contact with the two of them and to learn from them as well. Like, I feel like as a teacher, it's sometimes easy for me to get into like my little habits and my little like spaces where I don't necessarily always push myself, right? And working with Joanna and Vern have been really helpful for pushing my own practices and also like reimagining what classroom and what inquiry can look like. And I really think that, like, I don't know, that was one thing I learned. And then I also learned that students really love having a voice in terms of what they should write about or research or something like that. I know as like a literature English teacher, we often just, we have our text and we have them write a paper about that text. And for some students who are into it, I mean, it's great, but obviously not everyone's always into the books that we read in literature class, right? So allowing for opportunities to like refocus, is what Joanna was saying, on those skills, and then allowing students to explore those topics was also like really helpful and reinvigorating for me as a teacher.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I'm also wondering, well, I'll note this and ask you all, because I don't know from the chat, if it's possible to post exemplars of student project portfolios. I mean, we can attach them, but I don't know what kinds of permissions you all might need. So anyway, we can look into that if we need to. I'm also wondering if either of you have thoughts about where you were as you were moving along and you really had to pivot because whatever direction you were headed didn't work. And so I'm thinking of, others going into this work at first and, try to miss the potholes that you had to find.
I think this year we made a kind of a relatively different or a relatively big pivot for our students this year compared to last year. I feel like, and I'm sure other educators are seeing this too, but our students coming out of remote learning have very different habits, I'll say, than they did prior to remote learning. And so we decided to kind of gamify the research, in the initial research component. And we, instead of, bringing them down to the library and showing them a few things and then letting them do their initial research, we timed them and we said, okay, your task for this 10 minutes is to do this thing. And then we said, okay, now you got to move on. Now you have 5 minutes to do this thing. And then you have 10 minutes to do this thing. And so sort of making it a little bit more, pretending that it was more high stakes, I guess, with the timer projected on the screen helped a lot for the students who were just like distracted, I'll say distracted.
So that's what you were kind of working against, was they seem to have come back not able to focus as well, or?
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, I think everything Joanna said there was spot on. I also think, I don't know, like I think if what's nice about the way that we organized it, I think Vern came to us with the idea of kind of modeling what research projects she did for her master's, right? And what she was like, okay, like what we're gonna do is like first quarter will be like questioning, right? And second quarter and will be like sources and some research and like, and then third quarter is like maybe a little bit more research, maybe primary research, getting them to go out and survey if possible. And then fourth quarter is like presentation. And we decided to add a paper because we thought that they were ready to do it. And so because it was broken down over a year, it was a lot more manageable and also a lot more feasible to give feedback, and to also, I don't think it was as overwhelming for the students. Additionally, because of the fact that it's 3 of our classes, they then don't have finals technically for 3 of our classes, because they have that one, and that's that big messy project. So because we're able to work together in very specific collaborative ways, it allows for flexibility, and you can kind of make changes as you need to, and you can see like, okay, some groups are like, this group is a good one that we can challenge and push in these ways, and this group has these talents that we can use in these ways, right? So the flexibility of it and making it according to quarter really helped us out in that way, and I think allows for that flexibility and being able to see where everyone's at.
We also, I just thought of something else. We added a sort of a mini version of a project-based assessment right after winter break, or right after, I can't remember, in the winter time at some point this year, to sort of give the students more practice with the messier questions. We focused on climate change for those few weeks. But in all of our courses, we took a pause from the Big Messy Project and a pause from our individual content. And we worked in all 3 of our classes for 2 weeks on this one problem-based assessment. And it helped to give the students more instruction and more practice with these skills.
Thanks. Gosh, just by your responses to those questions, besides the great presentation, just really shows the engagedness of you both. And I am deeply appreciative that you've taken some time out of your day to share these things with us. Also, Damarr, for helping to set it up and sharing the overall project. It's such good work, and I'm so happy that you were able to share with us, and I look forward to hearing more, and we'll look into if we can get permissions or something to post any projects or whatever, because we all want to learn along with you. So appreciate it so much. Appreciate you, Damarr and Joanna and Tim. Thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for coming to listen to this great discussion. And Damarr, do you have any final things? All good?
Oh, sorry. No, just struggling to get off of mute. Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate the time and just the opportunity to share the work, right? And to hear feedback. We look forward to continuing this work and having more to share going forward as we iterate and improve and enhance our model, and the great work that's happening with CF as well. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And if you have any questions, please email me at dsmith30 or DSS Smith 30, and then at cps.edu, and then I'll get back to you pretty quickly. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Great. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.